Welcome to the Prepare programme, Prepare for Parole and Re-entry. Our organisation was launched in June 2021. It grew out of the work of Mary Jo Davis and her organisation, Second Chance for Women. It also grew out of work that women in MCIW were already doing to help themselves and to help others prepare for parole hearings. Our mission is to empower people to make their best case for parole. We do this by providing information about, materials for, and support with parole hearing preparation. We are working in person in the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women, but the long-term aim is that everyone in Maryland should be able to access support with parole hearing preparation. We believe that parole hearing preparation is a positive thing, not just for people and their families who are seeking early release, but for society more generally. There's 3 reasons for this. Firstly, it means there's better information available to parole decision makers about the person who comes before them, including a deeper understanding of their life story. Secondly, it ensures that there's better information available to the people themselves about the parole system and how they can make themselves into good candidates for early release. And thirdly, it ensures that people go to parole hearings with a solid re-entry plan which is tailored to their needs. We think those things lead to more success at parole hearings and more success upon re-entry. When a returning citizen succeeds, everyone wins.
The most important element in parole hearing preparation is the development of a parole packet. Some of the key elements in a parole packet are a life story, a remorse statement, and a re-entry plan. At a trial, the focus is on a small snapshot in time. At a parole hearing, the camera pans out and a person's past, present, and future all become relevant. It's almost always the case that when you understand a person's whole story, the events which led to their incarceration are more understandable. It's not about excusing wrongdoing, it is about explaining though. At Prepare, we help people write their life stories to include within the parole packet that they present to the Parole Commission, so they can be judged as the rounded human being they are, not just by reference to the crimes they committed.
Telling my life story to parole was very important so they can know who I was and not going by what my crime was.
Parole preparation really helps you get things in order, it helps you get organized, it really helps you reflect from the past to the present and everything you've worked on over the years. Like, I was incarcerated for about 7.5 years. So it really helped me reflect everything I've accomplished while being there and trying to actually get organized in the most simple form.
Because a lot of people's life story, it may not be the reason why, but it definitely plays a part in your crime. You know, it plays a part in your mentality, you know, mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even physically. So, you know, your life story has a lot to do with your crime sometimes, most of the time.
I really had a good parole experience. I had a dynamite parole hearing lady, and she gave me time to tell my story. And I told my story. I was nervous and scared in the beginning, but she made me feel so comfortable that when I told my story, it didn't take but 5 minutes and I made parole.
One thing the Parole Commission is looking to see is that the person before them has taken responsibility for the crime. This can be tricky because so often people who are in prison have dealt with many challenges in their own lives, challenges such as addiction, poverty, abuse, and discrimination. They've committed wrongs, but they have also been wronged, both by other people and by poorly thought out policies and far from perfect institutions. Nevertheless, in general, there isn't a better plan than owning responsibility for the past in order to go on and plan for a better future. At Prepare, we help people write their remorse statements so the Parole Commission knows they've accepted responsibility for the events which brought them into prison.
Yes, I think that's very important for you to show remorse. And even if you are the victim, even if you've been victimized, you still need to tell your story and show remorse. Because if you don't show remorse, that shows a different picture that you really didn't care which would happen.
I think that it is crucial for someone to take accountability and express that to the Parole Commission. Everybody has mitigating, circumstances or, tragedy in their life that leads to certain things, but if you can't take responsibility for your own actions and how you responded to those situations, you're just going to continue to have problems in life, down the road. And I think that's the lesson that they want to teach.
Parole is by definition early release. The Parole Commission is taking a chance on someone when it gives them early release. If that someone goes on to re-offend, the Parole Commissioners get criticised for making a bad decision and have to deal with the fact that their decision has led to a bad outcome. The reality is the Parole Commission doesn't have a crystal ball, so they can't know for sure who's going to re-offend. However, it is possible for a person to demonstrate to the Parole Commission that they have done their best to prepare for a successful re-entry. At Prepare, we help people develop strong re-entry plans by connecting them with suitable re-entry services, which will reduce their chances of returning to prison.
If I was in charge of reforming the Maryland parole system, I would definitely focus on the preparation group to help people who have no idea what's going on or how it works, so they can get organized and focused into getting their packets together so they have a chance to actually make parole. Because I feel as though parole commissioners, if they don't see a parole packet, or they might feel as though you're just winging it and that you don't really care and that you just think it's guaranteed. It gives parole commissioners a better look at each individual so they can't just make a judgment based on your charge.
I would advise somebody that has an upcoming parole hearing to reach out to Prepare, let them know that they want and need assistance, and get that process started, because for me, when I did that, that then helped give me a timeline to work towards individual goals for completing my packet. And then the last piece is, really just preparing yourself mentally, which is crucial, because how you present yourself and advocate for yourself once you get in there with them makes a big difference. I don't believe that their mind is already made up, when they see somebody. And I think you have a chance if you're going to advocate for yourself.
It began 50 years ago when the nun at the prison downtown asked me to teach meditation in the prison. And that's how I started. And I just kept going because I could see the great need of people that really didn't have anything to help them. So meditation was my beginning of helping. I found that if the women and men did not have a way to go back into society, if they didn't have the support, that what happened to them, they came right back into prison. And I could see that happening. So it was trying back then to really help them by getting into drug treatment programs when they were released. They didn't do that back then. So we really did a lot of time in preparing people for their release, that they would have a transitional house and a place where they could stay. And because of that, we found those people we helped in that way, they didn't go back to prison. Even the men, you know, and we know today that everybody keeps saying the criminals, but if you give them a chance to really secure themselves back in their community, they will survive and they will not commit more crimes. Re-entry was not a thing. In fact, the director at OSI called me the mother of transition. And that was a very nice title, because we really did a lot.
Parole hearing preparation is a team effort. The most important person is the person whose journey is at the center. However, many other people play a role in someone coming before the Parole Commission as a good candidate for early release. For example, there is loving family on the outside. There are true friends on the inside who use their time and talents to help others succeed. There are the program providers on the inside who assist people in pursuing their life goals. There are the re-entry service providers on the outside who support people in ways which reduce their chances of returning to prison. And there are wardens, case managers, and others in the institution who support programs like ours. Our work at Prepare is to harness those positive forces to put together strong cases for parole. We believe that everyone wins when people get out of prison as soon as possible on the trajectory of their own sentence and as prepared as possible for a successful re-entry.
That's a good question. First, coming out as hard as going in. For me, I had the advantage that most people today don't have and didn't have. And that is that I had an opportunity to work through the system. And I was participating in the work release and the family leave programs. So my transition was a lot more smoother, even though when they changed the policy, I had to spend 13 more years incarcerated. But when I was eventually released, that process, it was a smooth process. But as far as hard going in, it was certainly difficult going in. In fact, I think for the first maybe 5 to 7 years of my incarceration, I was sort of like in a state of suspended animation, because it was difficult for me to accept the fact that I was still incarcerated for something that I didn't do. So going in was a hell of a lot more difficult than it was coming out, that's for damn sure. Well, as far as my sense of dignity, I was raised by good parents. That was first, so I already had a good, strong moral foundation. And as far as, because I'm often asked the question, well, how did you do that? Well, people that are incarcerated, there will be two groups. My group would be in the minority. the majority of the people that are incarcerated committed some type of crime to be there. And so they're going to do time one way. The people that falls within my category is going to do time a different way. And our resolve is going to be a hell of a lot more stronger. I always knew that I was coming out of prison. I knew that that wasn't my ultimate destiny. I didn't know when, and I didn't know how, but I knew I was coming up out of there. And so, because I was innocent, and I knew that I was innocent, right? I just knew that that wasn't going to be my ultimate stop. I was coming up out of there. So that's how I dealt with it, right? And that set of people that's doing time for something that they did, to them, the process becomes like a means to an end. One of the reasons why I struggled and fought so hard to change the parole policy is because while I was in there, even though I was there for something that I didn't do, I met a lot of people that had effectively changed their lives, and I knew that they deserved another chance to be released. And so once I was ultimately released, I decided that I wasn't going to stop there. A good candidate for parole would be someone who's come into the system, has participated in most of the programs that is available to them, right? And that they've changed their lives. They're no longer the person that they were when that crime was committed. Certainly they would have to demonstrate remorse for what they've done, and have a good home plan, a good support system once they're released. That's going to be very, very important, right? And have dealt with whatever trauma that may have been responsible for leading them there in the first place. Well, I think the first thing is that now that the Parole Commission has the authority to actually release individuals, that the process should be looked at a little differently. And I form my answer this way is because the system has evolved over an extended period of time. And again, I was alluding to how there's a parole expectancy built into it. Well, when that was actually operating, you had the Division of Correction, which is DOC, and the Parole Commission actually working with each other. If the Parole Commission made a recommendation for something, the Division of Correction would honor that as much as possible. But they've gotten like completely away from that process. And so what I would offer at this point is that, well, I'm going to use three administrations. The first one would have been Campbell Goodlander. They were progressive Secretary of Public Safety and Commissioners of Corrections. And they instituted a process where the parole expectancy that's built into the system like really worked. And that was individual progressing to that ultimate stage. The next person or the administration was Mary Ann Saw and DeLeva, her commissioner. And what they've done, her deputy that is, right, is they started a program I think was called like Restart. And so where they would work with an individual once they came into the system and then follow them throughout their period of incarceration. So things that they will be doing would be geared toward their eventual release. And the next administration was most recent was Gary Maynard, and he had began to implement a process where once an individual even come into the diagnostic center, once they've been sentenced, a profile would be developed on them. And what that profile would do was follow them through the entire period of their incarceration. And so they would begin, rather than to start, a lot of the work that we are doing today is working on the back end when an individual is getting ready to be released, as opposed to working on the front end when an individual actually comes into the system. And if you start working on the front end for when an individual comes into the system, the parole commission would be sort of like similar to like a MAP contract. It would just say, look, if you proceed through the system doing X, Y, Z, when you get to this point, and I think you and I briefly had a conversation about, was it parole expectancy or parole? It was a term that was used, presumptive, so to say. And then once an individual done all of those things during their incarceration, then it wouldn't be a question as to whether they are deserving of parole because they've accomplished all the things that they should have accomplished while they were incarcerated, and then they would be paroled. So I think that, excuse me, beginning on the front end and then working with an individual during that period of incarceration, we wouldn't have to do as much work as we are doing on the back end now because the individual would already be prepared for release. Absolutely, this is an extremely important part of the process before an individual should even be considered for release, for that matter, because once they've been incarcerated, they've naturally lost contact with a lot of the things that they had prior to being incarcerated. And so having those things lined up and in place, so to say, would offer the type of support that they would need once they are eventually released.
Why doesn't the system help people build re-entry plans like that then?
Well, at one point, I think it was designed to do that, but it has gotten so far away from that, specifically because of the mass incarceration that has occurred, over the years. And we went way away from what was considered a rehabilitative process or an habilitative process. I tend to shy away from rehabilitated because that takes back to former. And I think habilitation, which just means to qualify an individual to do certain things. The system has gotten way away from that. And we have moved more and more toward incapacitation and warehousing as opposed to, again, habilitating individuals to be able to qualify once they are eventually released.
Why did we move towards that warehousing? I know it started in the 1970s that the numbers went sky high, but why do you think that's all happened? The warehousing, the approach, the mass incarceration and the warehousing as opposed to proactive habilitating, as you put it.
Funding had to be the large part of the process. A lot of the programs that were there when the population was lesser, they had funding for a lot of the programs and they could meet a lot of the needs of the individuals that were coming in. And once they began to saturate the institutions and build more institutions too, for that matter, right? They just didn't have the funding to be able to function at the capacity that the prison system had developed to.
I was warden of MCIW from 2004 through 2009. I think that parole preparation work that was introduced to MCIW was important work because it helped to prepare
the women to know how they could better themselves, put themselves in better positions for when they met with the Parole Commission for consideration to be placed on parole. A good candidate for parole looks like someone who has used their time being incarcerated to reflect on becoming the best person that they could be, someone who has taken advantage of all of the programmatic opportunities and educational opportunities that were afforded to them, the job opportunities that they could participate in, and just becoming the best person that they could be.
The question then pertains to whether or not it's helpful for someone coming before the Parole Commission to have prepared. There are organizations of which I am aware that are in a perfect position to help inmates prepare for the outside. You can't be expected, I mean, I've sat and heard dozens of applications for parole release. I'd say generally they're amateur. We don't really grade on the professionalism of your parole presentation. But to my way of thinking, and my background is as a lawyer for 47 years in the state of Maryland, it never hurts to be prepared. It never hurts to be really prepared. And so I think that the role of outside organizations such as Prepare, Second Chance, programs that are in our law schools here in Baltimore and in the state of Maryland are key to helping these individuals who are behind bars improve their chances. We're trying to address two parole commissioners who don't know you from Adam. They've read the parole file. The parole file is all bad stuff. So we've read it. We'd like to hear some good stuff. And the presentation is presented to us in a thoughtful, well laid out fashion, supported by plans that have grounding in fact and not in aspirations and hopes and wishes, then I think your chances are going to improve for a parole release. I've seen many of these cases, dozens of them, and I can tell you there's a big difference between those that have received professional assistance and those that are kind of winging it. No reflection poorly on those who are winging it, but you'd be ever so much improve your chances with some professional help.
We are a Maryland-based nonprofit. Our mission is to empower people to make their best case for parole. We do this by providing information about, materials for, and support with parole hearing preparation. We believe that parole hearing preparation is a positive thing, not just for people who are seeking early release and their families, but for society more generally. The reasons are, firstly, that it means that there is better information available to the decision makers deciding whether to grant them parole. That information includes a deeper understanding of their life story. Secondly, there's better information available to people themselves about the parole system and what they can do to make themselves good candidates for early release. And thirdly, it ensures that people go to their parole hearings with a solid re-entry plan, one that is tailored to their specific needs. We believe that these things lead to more success at parole hearings and more success on re-entry. Whenever a returning citizen succeeds, everyone wins.